Have you ever wondered how a smaller, seemingly weaker force can challenge a military superpower? It's not about fighting fair, it's about fighting smart. This is the core of modern asymmetric warfare, and it's completely rewriting the rules of conflict. Forget the classic image of two massive armies clashing on an open battlefield. Today's conflicts are far more complex. Asymmetric warfare is when two sides have vastly different capabilities, resources, and strategies. Think of it like a David versus Goliath scenario, but instead of a slingshot, David is using cyber attacks, drones, and social media. One of the most powerful tools in this new playbook is technology. Commercial drones, the kind you can buy online, can be modified into surprisingly effective weapons or reconnaissance tools. They're cheap, accessible, and can give a smaller force eyes in the sky, a capability that was once reserved for major military powers. This allows them to track enemy movements, guide artillery, or even carry out direct attacks, all at a fraction of the cost of a fighter jet or a military satellite. Then there's the digital battlefield. Cyber warfare has become a front line. A few skilled hackers can disrupt a nation's power grid, cripple its financial systems, or shut down its communication networks. This can cause chaos far behind the actual lines of combat, weakening an opponent from the inside out without firing a single conventional shot. The goal isn't just to destroy tanks, it's to create instability and undermine the public's trust in their government. Information itself has become a weapon. This is where propaganda and disinformation campaigns come into play. Using social media and online forums, groups can spread false narratives, sow division among the population, and manipulate public opinion both at home and abroad. A viral video or a trending hashtag can sometimes be more influential than a military victory. It's about winning hearts and minds, or at least, confusing them. This psychological warfare aims to erode an enemy's will to fight. Another key tactic is the use of proxy forces. Instead of direct confrontation, a major power might fund, train, and equip a local group to fight on its behalf. This creates a layer of deniability. The sponsoring nation can achieve its strategic goals without risking its own soldiers or facing international backlash. It makes the conflict messy, confusing, and incredibly difficult to resolve, as it's often unclear who is truly pulling the strings. Economic warfare is another critical front. Sanctions, trade disputes, and control over crucial supply chains can be used to strangle an opponent's economy. A nation's military might is built on its economic strength. By cutting off access to resources, technology, or international markets, one side can weaken the other's ability to sustain a long-term conflict. It's a slow, grinding strategy that can be just as devastating as a physical blockade. Guerrilla tactics are, of course, a classic element of asymmetric warfare, but they've evolved. Urban warfare is now more common than jungle ambushes. Fighters blend into civilian populations, making it incredibly difficult for a conventional army to operate without causing collateral damage. Every strike against them that harms civilians can be used as a propaganda tool, turning the local population against the larger military force. This creates a no-win situation for the conventional army. So, how do superpowers respond to these asymmetric threats? It requires a complete shift in thinking. Counterinsurgency is no longer just about military force, it's about winning the trust of the local population. This means investing in infrastructure, providing security, and engaging in effective public diplomacy to counter disinformation. It's a long, patient game of nation building under fire. Special forces also play a huge role. These elite, highly trained units are designed for the kind of surgical, small-scale operations needed in asymmetric conflicts. They can conduct raids, gather intelligence, and train local allies, operating with a level of precision and discretion that a large army can't match. Ultimately, the rise of asymmetric warfare shows that military might is no longer the only measure of power. Adaptability, technological innovation, and the ability to control the narrative are now just as important. The future of conflict isn't about bigger bombs, it's about smarter strategies. The battlefield is everywhere, from the screen in your hand to the global financial markets. Understanding this new reality is the first step in navigating the complex and unpredictable world of modern warfare. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown interesting, be sure to like the video and subscribe for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world. See you next time. The real danger of asymmetry isn't the initial incident. It's not about one drone hitting one ship. The real danger is the precedent it creates. It's the signal it sends. Once a vulnerability is demonstrated, it can never be unseen. It's out there. And every actor on the global stage, whether it's a nation-state or a non-state group, starts to study it. They don't just look to replicate the attack exactly. That's too simple. They look to adapt it. They want to find their own version, something that fits their resources and their goals. This is how a single tactical surprise, one unexpected event, morphs into a long-term strategic reality. It's a fundamental shift in the game. The moment cheap, off-the-shelf systems prove they can effectively challenge billion-dollar defense platforms, the entire logic of military investment changes. Suddenly, the calculus is different. You start seeing more drones. Not just a few, but swarms. Saturation attacks. The thinking becomes, why build one expensive, exquisite system when I can field 1,000 cheap, expendable ones? This leads to more experimentation. The barrier to entry for projecting power completely collapses. You no longer need a massive industrial base or a giant defense budget to pose a credible threat. At that point, defense planners are backed into a corner. They face an incredibly uncomfortable choice. They can either undertake the monumental task of redesigning entire defense systems from the ground up, or they can simply accept a state of persistent, ongoing exposure. Now, redesigning a modern military is a slow, bureaucratic, and mind-bogglingly expensive process. It takes years, even decades. But adaptation by adversaries? That's fast. It's iterative. It's cheap. They can learn from an attack on Monday and deploy a modified version by Friday. That imbalance, that gap in speed and cost, creates a deep, long-term strain on established powers. It is a marathon where one side is running in boots and the other is constantly finding new shortcuts. The problem then compounds as these new asymmetric tactics spread across different regions. Think about the world's most critical choke points. Naval passages like the Strait of Hormuz or the Bab el-Mandeb. Global trade routes that are the arteries of the world economy. Energy corridors that power entire continents. These are all places where visibility is high and reaction times are incredibly short. A system that was designed for global dominance, for projecting power outwards, suddenly finds itself forced into a defensive crouch. It's constantly looking over its shoulder, trying to plug holes that are appearing faster than they can be patched. And this has implications that go far beyond the battlefield. A country's military posture directly influences its diplomatic power. Stronger military, stronger hand at the negotiating table. Diplomacy, in turn, influences global markets. Stability and predictability are what investors crave. And markets, of course, influence the social and political stability within nations. So when deterrence, the very idea that you are too strong to be attacked, becomes less certain, behavior across the board begins to change. Nations start reassessing their risk tolerance. Actions that were once unthinkable suddenly become plausible. The management of escalation, that delicate dance to prevent a small conflict from spiraling into a major war, becomes infinitely harder. The potential for misinterpretation and miscalculation skyrockets. Someone might see a defensive adjustment as a prelude to an attack, or mistake a probe for an all-out assault. And the most dangerous part? None of this requires an actual war to start. It only requires the introduction of profound uncertainty into the system. That uncertainty then feeds into the machinery of global decision-making. Allies begin to quietly reassess their commitments. They ask themselves, can our protector truly protect us anymore? Adversaries, sensing an opportunity, start to probe the boundaries, testing reactions, seeing how far they can push. And neutral actors, the ones caught in the middle, they do the most logical thing. They start to hedge their bets. They play both sides, trying to maintain relationships with everyone because they're no longer sure who will come out on top. This hedging creates immense complexity. And complex systems have a nasty habit. They don't usually break with a loud, dramatic snap. Instead, they become fragile. They become brittle. They require more and more oversight, more coordination, and more active intervention just to keep them from falling apart. This is where the military story connects back to the broader global system. When security becomes harder and more expensive to guarantee, resources have to be reallocated. Military budgets start to climb. National priorities shift away from things like infrastructure, education, or healthcare, and toward defense. Difficult trade-offs have to be made. And those trade-offs matter immensely, because global resources and national budgets are finite. Every dollar spent on a new missile defense system is a dollar not spent somewhere else. The more effort, money, and brainpower required just to maintain the status quo of deterrence, the less margin for error the entire system has. It's like stretching a rubber band tighter and tighter. It might not break today, but everyone knows it's getting closer to its limit. Now, This doesn't mean that advanced, high-tech militaries are suddenly obsolete. A fleet of aircraft carriers is still an incredible symbol and tool of power. But it does mean that their dominance is no longer absolute. The era of uncontested control is over. It's being replaced by an era of constant, difficult management. And management is so much harder than control. Control is static. Management is dynamic. It demands constant attention, constant adjustment, and a state of constant readiness. And let me tell you, constant readiness is exhausting, and it is incredibly expensive. So the key lesson here isn't that cheap technology always beats expensive systems. It's not that simple. The lesson is that cheap, accessible technology fundamentally changes the rules of engagement. Asymmetry, on its own, doesn't win wars, but it absolutely reshapes them. It stretches out timelines, it dramatically raises the costs for the dominant power, and it erodes the certainty that was once the bedrock of global order. This erosion doesn't make headlines every day. It's a quiet, slow-moving process. But it accumulates. It builds up over time, like sediment in a river, until one day you look up and realize the entire landscape has changed. That one drone in the Red Sea wasn't powerful because of the damage it did. It was powerful because of the signal it sent. And that signal tells us something profoundly important about the world we are now entering. It's a world where raw strength is still necessary, but it is no longer sufficient. It's a world where absolute control is being replaced by a desperate need for resilience and adaptability. And it's a world where small, inexpensive tools can force huge, system-altering decisions. This isn't a prediction of the future. It's an observation of what is already happening right now. The system didn't fail with a loud bang. It is adjusting quietly. And it's in those quiet, almost invisible adjustments where the real story of our time truly lives. Thanks for watching. If this gave you something to think about, consider subscribing for more deep dives.